and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Hi, everyone. It's Lori LeBay with Alzheimer Speaks. And today we are going to be talking with Linda Burhans, and she is putting on a 3-day online conference called Connecting Caregivers. And it'll be May 6th, 7th, and 8th, and you are not going to want to miss out on what she has to say. Again, it is free and it is powerful. A large variety of speakers, which I know you'll appreciate. I also want to give a shout out to Maud's Awards. They are open now for applications until May 19th, and there, if you're an individual, you can win up to $5,000 and a corporation up to, or organization up to $25,000 for work you have already done. Let's see. I also want to mention if you're going to be in Minnesota, August 13th, I'll be out in Plymouth with AmeriChoice. We're going to be doing a presentation called Realities of Dementia. We're going to be exposing the tears, fears, and joy, and how each plays a significant role in how we care and how our care is perceived by others. And last, I'll give a shout out to Twiddle. If you are looking for something to help calm somebody down, maybe when they've got anxiety or sundowning, go to the number 4, twiddles.com. And if you put in AS25, you'll get 25% off to boot. So with no further ado, let's go talk with Linda. Well, Linda, I am so excited to have you back on the show. You have like this huge event coming up.
Yes.
And we need to make sure everybody in our community and others know about it so that they can help spread the word. You said you've already got almost 350 people signed up for it already, and it's not until May. So
But there's plenty of room for everybody.
Yep, it's online. It's an online conference with a fabulous lineup of people over those 3 days. But before we dive into that, why don't you just introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are and why the heck you're doing what you're doing?
So I am the gal who cares for the caregivers with love, laughter, and lessons learned, because I have a whole bunch of that stuff. I took care of my mom till the day she died, my husband, my dad. I wrote a book about my mom. When I wrote the book about my mom, I went out to promote it, and every time people came up to me crying that they needed help. And nobody told me anything when I was taking care of my mother. I didn't even know my mother had dementia until after she passed away. We were just focused on stage 4 colon cancer. But she did, and I did some smart things that I just didn't know. Just as a daughter, just like intuition, I wanted to do things to make her feel happy and content and everything. So when the book was published and I went out to promote it, every time people came up to me crying, saying they needed help, and that was about 5,000 support groups, radio shows, workshops ago. And I hope to continue as long as I can, just spreading the words to caregivers so they can find the joy in the journey.
So important. So
Yeah.
important, because so much of the advertising out there is all negative. And I go crazy even like when I see some of the medication commercials and they're like, and then mom got aggressive, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
well, they're approaching her from behind. It's right there in the commercial.
Right.
That's why she's reacting, and it's like there's
Right.
so many little things we can do to avoid those situations. But if we're not told, we don't know. And it's like
You don't know. You know what? I felt like it was a privilege for me to be with my mother. Because the last 18 months of her life, I was with her every single day, except when I went to jury duty one day, they wouldn't let me bring her. But it was a privilege, but I had to really focus. I had to really focus on what was going on and what I was doing. My business ended up hurting and some other things, but I wouldn't switch it for anything in the world. Changed my whole career, changed everything. I mean, my mother died in December and I finished the book on Mother's Day. So that's 5
Wow.
months. And the last line of the book is Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I hope I always make you proud of me. And she's in heaven loving that I'm speaking about her all the time.
That's kind of how I feel about my own mom.
Yeah.
And I switched careers too. I mean, this is such a profound journey, and when you're going through it, and I'll just speak for myself, but I mean, I felt so lost and so incapable of doing what I was supposed to do, even though I was a loving daughter.
Right.
When you don't feel guided or supported, you're like, you're questioning everything you're doing and why you're doing it. And then for me, then I got to the point of I'm not taking their advice. I'm not listening to their comments because they're always negative. They really
Yeah.
don't know what's going on. And at that point, I just like, I'm going to listen to my intuition. I'm going to look at my mom's reactions. And if she smiles and happy, then I'm going to keep doing it.
Right.
I mean, it got really simple. It's like, stop making this more complicated than
Yeah.
what it has to be. But yeah, it's a very profound emotional experience. And,
Yeah.
and the lessons you learn are applicable throughout all of your life. It's
Yeah,
not,
definitely. When I see someone come into a support group, especially if it's their first time, and everyone starts chatting, because everyone is always so kind and welcoming, always. And all of a sudden you just see them go, oh, my heart. Because when you can let down those barriers and when you can try to get some solutions, you can find the joy in the journey. You can find that time, which is like just so sacred and so important that you want to. I mean, 2 weeks ago in a support group, a new woman said, my husband threw the vacuum cleaner at me. And one of the other girls goes, so did mine. I feel so much better.
and then they can laugh. And
Yeah.
it cuts through all that tension, you
And you
know.
know that you're not the only one.
Yep. That makes such a huge difference to people to feel connected and and to feel heard and understood, like
Understood.
someone's actually gone through this, because most of us are talking to people that don't have a clue, and they're giving us all kinds of advice that it's like, well, no, that's not going to work.
No,
I mean, it's not going to work with your
no,
person, but they're like, oh yeah, it'll work. And it's like, oh, and then I would try it many times, and then I'm like, nope, that didn't work at all.
no.
So yeah,
Yeah.
when you're
I think a lot
validated.
of it is intuition. I think a
Mhm,
lot of it is intuition and knowing your loved one. When you're taking care of your mother or your father or your spouse, you know them pretty sacredly.
mhm.
And I think you know them better than anyone else, and no one else can stand up for them better than you can. And I think that's so important. But I think that is also, like I said, a sacred position to be
Mhm.
able to have that, and to have that time because none of us are getting out alive.
Exactly.
Let's make the best we can of it.
Well, and it's kind of like when, you have a newborn, and, there's no book that's going to really teach you how to do this, but we learn to watch their multi-sensory clues that they're giving
Right?
off. We listen more intently, we watch more closely, and we don't do that to adults.
No.
And when when our basic verbiage goes away, we really have to tune back into that just really subtle mode of caring and paying attention. But we're so dang busy
Well,
doing
I can't tell you
so
how many caregivers I have to tell them, touch your mother,
much.
touch your mother, hold her hand, hug her, rub her like you would a baby, right? Oh, I want to hug you. I want you to feel good. I want you to we all want that.
Yeah.
And we forget because sometimes we're so overwhelmed as caregivers, we're worrying about pooing and peeping and medicine and eating and what that we're not down to those basics.
Well, have you ever gotten, because I've heard this from many people, we're not a touchy-feely family. So we've never hugged. We've just, we don't tell each other we love one another. And I'm like, I've never met a person, an elderly person who hasn't appreciated that hug or that gesture. Again, if they know it's coming, especially with dementia, you can't just grab them from behind and scare
Right.
them. But and a lot of times they'll say, you know, how much they appreciate it because they grew up without that, and they
Yeah.
always wanted to break the cycle but didn't know how. And
Yeah.
so you're breaking this cycle, and you're leading the way for others.
It could just
If you
start with
understand.
holding hands. Just hold
Yeah,
hands. Just hold
yeah.
hands. And I can remember one day my mother was at my house. She's in the den, and I come walking in, and she's like this.
Hmm.
And I go, "Ma, what are you doing?" She's like,
Uh-huh.
I'm just looking at my old ugly arthritic hands." And they
Uh-huh.
were pretty bent up and
Hmm.
stuff. Now, I know I have a limited time with my mother. My mother has stage 4 colon cancer.
Hmm.
And normally I would have said, "Oh, mom, those hands are just fine. Oh, mom, here's some hand cream." So I sat down and I took my mother's hands in mine. And I said,
Uh-huh.
"Mom, besides how many dishes these hands washed and how many clothes, I said, these hands wiped my tears and combed my hair. I said, and these hands gave me a little whack on the behind when I deserved it, Mama. I said, these are the best hands in the world." And my mother just so softly said to me, "Thank you, Linda." And that was one of the most profound moments I could cry now in my life. And what did it take me?
Yep.
1 minute?
But it was authentic and it was real. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it
No.
it showed appreciation, it showed love, it showed concern. It just showed so much in so few words.
And
And
she was still the mom.
yep,
For that, in that moment, she was still the mom.
exactly.
I had a caregiver call me a while ago crying, and she said, my mother was the best mother in the world until I was 10 years old. She
Hmm.
said, then my mother got into a car accident and she got addicted to opiates. She said,
Mm.
and then she was the worst mother in the world. She said she would bring men home and drugs and all sorts of things. So as soon as I was old enough, I got out of the house. She said, fast forward 25 years later, my mother has Alzheimer's and I have to care for her. She said, she's angry, I'm angry, she's angry, she's angry I left, the whole deal. And nothing I'm suggesting is working.
Hmm.
And one morning I just went out on my dock. I'm like, "Dear God, help me, please, please, please." And I called her up and I said, Julie, tell me about a time that was really special with your mother." And she said, "You know what? When I used to come home from school, my mother used to brush my hair, and she still has long hair." And I said, "Do you think you could go to your mom and say, Mama, nobody ever brushed my hair like you do?" And she goes to me, "You are pushing it, Linda." I said, "Okay." But now, every afternoon at 4 o'clock, her mother brushes her hair. She said, and I get to be the little girl, and she gets to be the mom, and we're trying to forget about the other stuff.
How beautiful is that?
Yeah,
It's recreating those moments. And there's a lot of families who have gone through really tough times and go, how do I care for someone who did not care for me?
right. And sometimes you can't.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to find someone else that can care for them because
Yep.
it just might not be the best thing for either of you.
Yep.
But many times I try to tell people, try to forgive. Nothing's going to change from here on in. This person's going to go. And, try. And sometimes people go, think I'm nuts. But most of the times they're like, you got something valid to say there. Something valid to say there.
Yeah, because there's always new moments to be created
Yeah.
that can offset that. And sometimes, a person with dementia will get maybe FTD and their personality will change. So a grouchy old, person who wasn't caring for others well, wasn't kind, is now, this sweet pea. And everyone's like, where was this person all my life? But other times you can have sweet pea turn into, kind of a gargoyle and get real mean
Yeah.
too. And that's really difficult for families to adjust to as well. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I remember a woman came into my group one time and she said, Alzheimer's saved my marriage. I was like, excuse me? I
that's
mean,
a new one. Yeah.
I was like, excuse me? And she said, my husband was always go, 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 even on vacation. Every minute he had scheduled to do something.
Mhm.
She goes, now he's like, hey, babe, what do you want to do?
Yep. Yep.
She
Yep.
said, I can deal with it. I feel much happier than I was before. I said, God bless you. God bless you.
Oh gosh. Well, let's talk about this huge conference that you're putting on, Connecting Caregivers Conference. That's coming up in May.
May
And
6th, 7th, and 8th.
okay, what do people need to know?
What do people need to know? That there are 18 great speakers over 3 days, that
Mhm.
it is totally free for caregivers from the comfort of your home. And now 3 days is a long time. I have a hard time doing the whole 3 days and I'm running it. But anyone who registers for the conference, within 30 days, they receive all the videos of the conference for free of charge to watch whenever they want, or to
Mhm.
share, or to review, or because the story is just like with this podcast or my radio show. I was listening to the show, Linda. It was really good, and then mom had to go to the bathroom.
Yep.
So through the power and the gifts of COVID, everything is recorded now and saved. But like I said, due to our wonderful sponsors, it's totally free to caregivers. And you're one of the speakers, which makes me so happy. And we have a lot of people, we have a lot of different speakers. We have elder care attorneys, we have hospice, we have, we'll be talking about caregiver burnout. We'll be talking about a lot of different things. And I really think there's something there for everybody. And many people tell me, I just decided to listen to this one session. It didn't have anything to do with me now. And 3 months later, it did have something to do with them. And then they understood better because they were more prepared. Because once again, with the caregivers, I want them to be prepared. I don't want them living in a state of frenzy.
Well, and that's such a good point because it's so much easier for us to act and respond when we're educated,
Right.
because then we're not as panicked. I mean, even if we're still not sure, at least we're not at this level of panic. We might be here, because you
Yeah.
at least have a basis, and you have an idea of where to reach out to for more information, which is
Well, and some of my caregivers have said, I got the recording and I just sent this particular session to my sister and said, please watch this.
mhm.
Because, your one sister knows it all. She knows it all, the one sister.
Even though she hasn't seen her for a year, or
No, and even though she may be a nurse too.
yeah,
But anyway, but they
yeah.
said, and my sister watched that one session and she understood some of the stuff that I was going through and that I couldn't explain to her before.
Mhm.
So that's wonderful.
Well, and sometimes, family just can't listen to one another. That's not been their roles growing up.
Right.
One person always knew it all and they were kind of the troubleshooter. And so and then, it might be the black sheep that's full of information. It was really, changed their life and they really want to help. And everyone's like, nah,
Yeah.
nothing. And I mean, it's funny and it's sad at the same time, but those roles in families don't always change,
No.
and people aren't always welcomed in, and that can be a really difficult time for the whole family, with that.
Well, I'll tell you, it was even interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I had a live speaking engagement, and it was the first time my sister ever heard me speak. And I felt like certain parts I had to watch what I was saying.
Hmm.
Because my relationship with my mother, she had her relationship too, and I go into a
Yeah.
lot of personal things, and I did alter in a little bit of what I would have, said otherwise. Like when my mother said she was moving to Florida, I'm like, yeah, 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 you know.
Oh,
Um,
I totally get that.
but yeah, you have to, take everybody into account there too,
Yeah.
you
Well, I
know.
remember after my dad died, I told my brothers I was probably going to write a book, and I still haven't written this book yet. And I shared a few stories with them. And I remember my older brother going, well, where'd you get those stories? And I'm thinking, I was there.
Yeah,
And it changed my whole perspective because I was so frustrated with my brothers because I wanted them to be more like me. I wanted them to come around. I wanted them to be, more involved. And my mom was still alive. And I just thought, you still have that opportunity. But like they didn't even think the stories were real because they had never experienced anything like that. And
Yeah.
they didn't because they weren't around for things like that to even happen.
And some people just don't pay attention either. You know,
Yep.
it, my one sister, tells us all the time that she's the favorite. Well, I know I am, so I don't
Mhm.
really care. So, but if she wants to be the favorite, you're the favorite.
Mhm.
And you know, when people pass, sometimes certain people need to be with them. I
Yep.
didn't need to be with either of my parents. I was with them
Mhm.
all the time. But my sister needed to be with my dad. And as it worked out, she was the only one there. And it was
Mhm.
perfect. It worked out perfect. And about 3 months later, I was chatting with her and she was still grieving. And she said, wasn't it so wonderful for dad to wait for all of us to come? And then I said, yeah. And it wasn't it so wonderful that he waited us for all of us to leave so he could be with his favorite.
Oh, oh,
Healed. I just wanted her to
yeah.
feel better. I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care. Whatever. I want everybody to be able to have those relationships and have those moments with their loved one if it's possible.
Hmm. Yeah. In my family, I was when my dad died. um, my brother and I were there. My older brother left, but my older brother tells everyone he was the only one there. And Scott and I both looked at each other like, where was he? And it was just like what, like you said, whatever anybody needs to do. And I wasn't there when my mom died because I had two speaking engagements, and I'm just a small company. It's moi, so I had to go to Arizona to speak, and I really struggled with that initially. But my mom was coming to me literally in dreams and telling me, you're not going to be here. I need you to continue the work. I need to know you're going to keep
Wow.
doing this. And then my brothers thought I was having a nervous breakdown because they're like, well, she's always the one. And part of it, I think, was they were scared to be there alone because, like, Lori always
Yeah.
handles
Yeah.
this. And it ended up being my 18-year-old daughter really handled the brunt of everything. But I was very involved through video conferencing, which shocked me. We just FaceTime, and I didn't even think of that. My daughter did, so
Yeah.
I didn't miss a beat. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really so inclusive, and again, she was still teaching me how to help connect people, through all of that, and
Yeah.
what it felt like to be kind of outside of the actual situation. And I didn't have to be outside, but so many of us put ourselves outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the conference in terms of the dates and the times? And
Okay. So it's May 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Mhm.
Starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. It ends at 4 o'clock on Tuesday and Wednesday and at 3 o'clock on Thursday. Everybody can go to the website, which is Connecting Caregivers Conference.com. You can register there. You can see a list of all the speakers. You can see what time they were going to be on, and so you can go see your favorites or whatever. You can see their bios and get an idea of what they're speaking about. So I think that's a great thing. And please share it with anybody because I like to say, some of the things will be probably right spot on for you right now. Some maybe not right now, but maybe later. Or maybe for a friend or for someone else. Because everybody knows a caregiver. Everybody.
One of the things I just want to mention is the time frames that you mentioned. That's Eastern time,
Yes.
and so I would imagine when they sign up, it'll convert into their own time
Yes.
frame, time zone,
Yes.
and
Yes.
stuff. So that makes a big difference. And it looks like speakers on average are talking about an hour or so.
Yeah,
Uh,
usually I speak about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. There's some time for questions if you want. Now, what happens is sometimes people put questions in the chat as we're doing the conference, but
uh-huh.
sometimes people go to the website and when they see certain speakers, they know questions so they email me ahead of time and say,
Okay.
when this speaker is on, can you ask this question for me? So it just depends. So people have the opportunity to do it either way.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as a speaker that's going to be there, will you let us know if we have questions ahead of time or
Yeah,
not?
I'll let you know ahead of time and day of I'll be monitoring because it's really weird. Sometimes during the conference, all of a sudden people start texting me questions. Some of my regular caregivers or whatever, they don't go to the chat room, they just text me, Linda, ask her this.
Yeah.
So We're
Well,
just
and that's good. That's a big job that you're holding, and that's a long day,
it's yeah, when those 3 days are done, I'm like, oh.
yeah, that's a lot, and it's so wonderful that people can access those videos for a week
Yeah,
because, like you said, not everybody can sit there that whole time. And I would really encourage listeners to pass this information along because um, getting all of these free resources that just doesn't
yeah.
happen every day.
Yeah, and there are people that are giving away things, will be giving away things in some of the parts of the conference too, so you don't want to miss that.
Yep.
And every day at lunchtime we have Cindy and Christina from Adaptive Equipment, and they're going to show us the greatest and newest tools for different things for people, whether it's wheelchairs or walkers or adaptable clothing or whatever it is, and that is always a big hit for the conference
Yeah,
because
they are such a wealth of
I
information
love them.
and just so kind and gentle in terms of explaining. I mean, they know the ins and outs, and they're
Yeah,
like, well, a lot of us have trouble with this and this, and it could be opening a jar or special
yeah,
silverware or, like you said, clothing.
yeah.
It can be equipment. They just have
Well,
such.
I know if somebody asks me something I don't know, I just go to them. I'm
Yep.
like, tell me what we can do for this. And they always know.
Yep.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that, well, especially in my Tampa Bay community here, but even in our larger community, we do have a lot of professionals that want to make a difference, that want to work together. That, if I don't have the answer for you, believe me, I'll find the answer for you from somebody else.
Hmm.
And I'm so blessed that we have those relationships. Because sometimes I go some places and people are like out in the boondocks and there's no resources there, there's no relationships, it's so much harder for them to get help. But now with the internet and things being, when COVID first started, I was like, oh my goodness, my support groups, what am I gonna do? I need to touch my people, I need to hug my people. I had no choice. But now I have caregivers from all over the United States and Canada that never had a support group anywhere near them. So, and you don't have to get dressed up and you don't have to find someone to take care of your loved one. You don't have to park. You don't have to, it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I know my memory cafe, we're online now, and our group, I mean, they fought it tooth and nail, and then COVID hit, and I'm like, that's really the only way we can do it. And they finally went, oh, okay. But then when COVID passed, they decided they wanted to stay online because it was so much
Exactly.
more convenient. And
Yeah.
they gained a lot more time. They didn't have the travel time, or they didn't have the prep time in terms of getting rushed, or if
Right.
the loved one was just tired that day, they could sleep and the caregiver could still participate. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of advantages. I think the thought was if it's online, it's not going to be as authentic.
You are genuine.
Yeah, and that kind of got kicked to the curb really quickly,
Yeah.
with all of
Yeah.
that. So,
So,
yeah, it's just amazing all of the stuff you do. And I love that people can ask questions prior and send them in,
yeah.
or during the conference as well. It's neat that there will be some giveaways for some people as well. So
Yeah.
that's cool. How do you do the giveaways then? Is it a number thing or is it?
So I think I don't know the people that are giving. We're still talking this week, but I
Uh-huh.
think like the elder care attorney wants to give some free estate planning, so like a
Okay.
couple of packages or something. So I don't know if it'll be like everybody goes in the chat, whoever says hello in the chat, and then we pick out five randomly, or what it's going to be, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I hadn't talked to you about it, but I can throw in a couple of books.
Perfect.
I'll give a couple Betty the Bald Chicken books out,
Perfect.
and send those out. So that's not a problem either. Well, just fun. I'm just going to go in and kind of read some of these titles off that might
Okay.
attract people. So on Tuesday, they're going to be kicking off with how to avoid a dementia crisis, overcoming stigma and being prepared. Then from 10 to 11, finding your fit. 11 to 12, ramps and lifts. What you need to know before you need one. And oh my gosh, that's so critical. And then you've got the gals with the adaptive equipment that'll be on at 12:20. Then I'm on with Betty the Bald Chicken, lessons in how to care. 2 to 3, Caregiving without burnout, regain peace and strength today. And then from 3 to 4, Braille for the brain, optimizing function. On Wednesday, they're going to kick off with praying for care. Medicaid planning, pros and cons, cost and strategy, who pays, when to act, and how to save. Or it's not praying, it's paying. nowadays,
It's
nowadays,
both. It's both.
nowadays it is praying because everything is getting cut, so we don't really know what's
Yeah,
going to be
exactly.
covered anymore. Um, then from 10 to 11, navigating the life care continuum, which will be really interesting. 11 to 12, how to handle caregiver guilt. Oh my gosh, I hear that all the time
Yeah.
in the support groups. You've got the adaptive equipment gals again, and then you've got balancing act, thriving in the sandwich generation. I was one of those. And that can be really difficult, and even more difficult, I think, for friends to understand sometimes.
Yeah.
2 to 3 is aging in place. What the heck does that really mean? No, it's a term we hear all the time, but a lot of times you don't know what that means until you're thrown in.
Exactly.
And then wrapping up Wednesday is putting the oxygen mask on first and surround yourself with those who can ensure that you can thrive, not merely survive. And then the last day is Thursday, the 8th. They're going to be talking about Hospice 101, which I think is so important. So many
Yeah.
people do not understand that.
No.
10 to 11, intimacy, drugs, and ADRD. Um, 11 to 12, 5 secrets for energy and joy. And that can be a tough mix sometimes when you're feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
So that's a great one. And then you've got the adaptive equipment gals again highlighting things. 1 to 2, hope and healing for Alzheimer's, caregiving as a spiritual journey. And then the last one is let's get engaged in how to find connection through reminiscence. So really just a wonderful, wonderful sprawl of, a little here and a little there. And
Yeah.
so much of, I think, what will be taught during this stuff that I think people that we need to talk about more is that everything you learn can be applied in other areas of your life. You don't just have to have a person with dementia to get takeaways from probably any of these situations, any of these
Well, the thing is too that almost every presenter has
Mhm.
lived through this journey. So, and it's just like with the equipment, people design things because mom needed it or my husband needed it or this is what and so I think it's so much more personable when you know that the person who's presenting really knows how you're feeling.
Yeah, yep.
Really
And
knows how you're feeling. And you can crack a joke and you can laugh. Recently a couple of weeks ago when I did that live speaking engagement, when it was over, 3 different people came up to me and they said, "You should be a comedian." So I'm thinking maybe I'm gonna start doing some caregiver comedy. Who knows?
well, it definitely, I mean, to me, humor is one of the main core values in
Yeah.
relationships. And so often we give that up. Thinking this is serious, we can't do that anymore. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is like the best medicine is
Yeah,
to
exactly.
have that belly laugh. And, silly stuff happens and you're not
Yeah.
laughing at them, you're laughing at the situation. And there would be times I know with my mom, like one time we were going up to the lake and it was winter and she got all the way into the cabin. And then in the little vestibule, she slipped and she fell. So there she is in this, and it's a smaller little area. And my mom's a big woman, and my daughter and I are trying to get her up. And I'm like, Mom, bend your knee. And she goes, okay. And literally, she's bending her finger like this. And we're like, no, Mom, your knee. And all three of us are cracking up to the point we're almost peeing our pants. And my husband comes in the door and he's like, this isn't funny. This is serious. We've got to get your mom up, And so we're trying to get her up. And Tom and I are trying to lift her, but she's literally walking up the cabinets. She wouldn't bend her legs. And so we're hoisting her up, and somehow her back was still straight, and she's walking literally up the
Oh
cabinets.
my goodness.
And I'm telling my daughter, knock her behind her knees, just knock her so her legs would drop down, and so her feet dropped down. We all were laughing. My husband still didn't get it. He's just like, this is not funny, and he was so anxious. And the three of us, I mean, we just laughed so hard over that. And it
Yeah.
was just one of those, I mean, it's a memory I'll never ever forget. And I will
Yeah.
always cherish because we were working as a team the best we could, with the
Yeah.
situation at hand. And nobody
And
got
just
hurt.
sometimes the things they come out with, I would be in church with my mother and she'd say loudly, "Didn't that one look in the mirror before she got dressed this morning?" I'm like, "Mom,
Yeah.
we're in
Yeah.
church."
Filter's gone. Yeah.
Like, what? But
And
and so many people that happens, they get so embarrassed. Well, when you're in a support group, everybody just starts laughing because you get it. You
well,
get it.
and you can't take it back, those things.
No.
It happened, people saw it, so you either live graciously with it or you make a scene.
Well, you know what the thing too is we have to let people know that our loved one has
Hmm.
issues because if we don't let them, if they know, then they understand, then they're gonna be happy. They're gonna help you with. They'll laugh at some of the stuff you laugh
Yep.
at. But if they don't have a clue what's going on, they'll think you're being mean or whatever,
Yep.
and
They get
they
scared.
can't help you and support you if you know. I On the back of my business card it says the person I'm with has Alzheimer's and dementia, may not understand clearly. Please be
Mhm.
patient. And a woman came to my support group one time. I always give them out. She took a bunch and she called me a couple of days later and said, "Can I have 14 more cards?" I was like, "Sure." So I leave them at my house. She comes and gets them. She comes to the next group. She says, "Those saved my life." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, they live in a mobile home park and her husband's starting to wander in people's yards. And when he walks the dog, he's not cleaning up the poo. And everybody's giving him dirty looks. So she went around, she gave one card to every neighbor. And the neighbor said, "He can come in our yard. We'll clean up the poo. Maybe he would like some lemonade." So now
Mhm.
she has a whole people surrounding her there that want to help instead of giving her husband dirty looks because she didn't clean up the poo.
Huge difference. And we try to protect them, and I think sometimes protect ourselves. We don't really want to admit it, and we don't want to be treated different. We don't want them to be treated different. But we all need to be treated different
Yeah.
when this hits, and people need to understand. They need to be educated because that's how we remove the fear of it all. You
Our
know.
children also, one of my caregivers, her husband used to do a lot of hunting with his grandchildren and boating and all this stuff. And his children knew, but they didn't want to tell their children, his grandchildren, for whatever reason. And so one day, the little boy's behind the barn crying. And his grandma goes up and he goes, "Everything I do is wrong with Grampy lately. He's always yelling at me. He never yelled at me. I don't know." So his grandmother said, "Your Grampy has a disease and your parents are going to tell you all about it tonight." And she called her kid. She said, "I'm done. You need to tell them." Well, you know what? That kid came there 3 days later and ran up and grabbed Grampy and hugged Grampy because he gets it. And it's
Yeah,
okay if Grampy's sick because I still love him. We need to
huge.
do that. Don't cut your kid short. Don't let them love him.
Well, and I think people think that they're protecting their kids, and they're really not. This is
No.
real life. People get sick, and they are so creative in terms of how to care. They frame caring different than we do as adults. Yeah.
Yeah, they're much easier on everybody than we are.
Well, because they still want to play.
Yeah.
And Grampy can still play. He can interact, and they're not going to judge at who he was because or how he did things
Yeah.
before because they didn't
Because
know
he's
that.
Grampy. And
Yeah.
I might suggest to our listeners today too is many times if people haven't seen Grampy for a while and Grampy maybe have declined a little bit before people come to visit and everything. And lots of times I'm talking about the teenage kids and maybe the kids that are a little older. They don't know what to talk to Grampy about. The little kids are okay.
Hmm.
So I suggest that you make a memory box.
Hmm.
So if Grampy was born in Brooklyn, print out some pictures of Brooklyn. If
Uh-huh.
Grampy was a Cub Scout leader, print out the Cub Scouts and put whatever his den number was. And then they can just pick it up and say, "I didn't know you were a Cub Scout leader."
Yeah.
Or "I didn't know you were born in Brooklyn," or "I didn't know you were in the Navy," or whatever it is. And then they can have those conversations, and those conversations can be some of the most fabulous conversations ever.
Well, and to be able to get to learn about somebody, it, when reminiscing about their life and just hearing their story, right or wrong, because sometimes us as kids will go back and go, no, that's not what happened, and it's just like, let them tell their story. It's okay to let
I
them tell their story, however they remember it. And then, if they hear the correct story later on down the road, that's okay too. But then it becomes this special thing that happened. I remember with my mom, this cracked me up. My daughter would go up and visit my mom with her boyfriend, and they were teenagers, and so Derek was really into cars, and Danielle had always known her grandma with dementia, so they were like two peas in a pod. But to make Derek feel comfortable, they talked about cars. Well, Danielle comes home and says, I didn't know grandma had a pink Cadillac with a sound system, and what was it, I can't remember what they're called, but it's when the wheels, the hubcaps turn.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, first of all, the sound system wasn't around. You were lucky if you had a radio in your car. And they sure didn't have spinners for hubcaps back in the day. And grandma never, ever had a pink Cadillac. She sold Avon, and she was always a little jealous of the Mary Kay.
Mary Kay.
And so that just cracked me up. But they all had a good time.
What fun.
And it really was. It was just like, it was like,
I
see
had
what?
somebody I
Mhm.
had somebody interview my mother the last 6 months of her life. So the
Mhm.
day of my mother's memorial, she brings me 10 CDs on my mother.
Oh,
One's
wow.
on her faith, one she sings all the silly songs when we were kids, and that day she remembers the words. But on one of the interviews with about one of my sisters, she talks about one of her husbands as the good husband. That wasn't the good husband. That was the bad husband. And the other one, but we don't care. We know, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Just let it go. But she's like, yeah, he wasn't such a nice guy. No, he's the nice one, Mom. You're talking about the wrong husband.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny.
Who cares, right?
Yep.
Every time
Yep.
we get to that part, we all start laughing.
Yep. Oh, those are they're just really small little things, but to me, those are the most precious.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are by far, they wipe out some big things that happened in my life that I thought were big moments.
yeah.
And those big things are nothing compared to these sweet little
Because
tidbits.
these sweet little things are really living in the moment.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is living in the moment, which is what
Yeah.
we're supposed to be doing all the time.
That'll be, I'm sure, a continuing theme throughout your conference as well, because people go, "What does that mean? And how do I really do that?" And so you'll
We'll
hear a
talk
lot.
about strategies and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of people coming from different ways of how they found they were able to do that. Because there isn't a one way, or a right
No,
way or a wrong way. We're all different, and what you learn in one moment might not work in the next. And
yeah.
so this is just your conference is really a brilliant way for people to build a toolkit for themselves and do it for free on
It's
top of
all in one space.
yeah,
When I was learning, I had to go to this seminar here, and then I had to read that book there, and then I had to go hear this speaker here. You can get a nice little education here.
very much so. Very much
And like
so.
I said, as long as you register within 30 days, you receive all the videos of the conference for the rest of your life.
I didn't realize it was for the rest of their life. I thought it was just for a week or something. So that's
Oh,
huge. That's another huge factor
yeah.
for people to consider,
Yeah, you
because
can share it. You can go back and look at it again later. You know.
so many of the conferences on this order, and our audience might not know that, is it might be free up front, but if you want the videos, then you have to pay a
Yeah,
fee for them later on, and it can be
yeah,
a fairly sizable amount of
yeah.
money. And so this is really a fantastic opportunity for people.
That's why I'm very grateful to our sponsors. We have wonderful sponsors that really care about the caregivers.
Well, that's fantastic. So they can go to the website, which is Connecting Caregivers, and both of our,
Conference.com.
yep. And then how do they tap into your radio show then too?
The best thing is either to go to my website, lindaburhans.com,
Mhm.
or my YouTube channel, Connecting Caregivers.
Okay,
But on my
wonderful.
website, lindaburhans.com, there's all the radio shows. There's the Tuesday tips that I do every Tuesday for 5 years now. Um, there's a blog. There's a whole bunch of stuff there.
Wow. Wow. Well, Linda, you have made a huge impact and continue to make a huge impact. And from my bottom of my heart, I can't say how much I appreciate all you do because you're really changing a lot of people's lives
I'm
and
so
doing
grateful
great
you're part of the
things.
conference, and I can't wait to meet you in person one day.
I know one of these days that's going to happen for
I'll
sure.
do it.
For sure. Well, sounds good. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And again, thank you, Linda. I really look forward to being part of your conference, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you,
Um,
my friend.
you are amazing. So, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a delicious day.
So, in wrapping up, I just want to again thank Linda. She is absolutely amazing. And I want to just give you guys all a heads up too. Check out alzheimersspeaks.com. We have tons of free educational information there. Same with our sister company, Dementia Map, which is a global resource directory. And if you provide services, products, or tools and you're not in there yet, sign up. Reach out to me if you'd like to talk more about that, but you can easily do that from the site as well. And last, I always encourage people to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share this information because there's always somebody in your sphere of influence that can use this information. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.